Have you ever encountered a game that looks cool, but can easily be described as just good enough? I'm not talking about meh or mid, I mean a straight up 7 out of 10. Back in the day, these kind of felt like they were the lifeblood that propped video games up, but since game development, much like everything in the 2020s, got way more expensive, we got way less of them as the quality bar for gaming at the beginning of the HD development era started getting higher. This is kind of sad because while some games still meet that niche, all we get now are the tippiest of the tip-top tier of AAA or an independent darling that's made by a team of 3 people or a single person that breaks containment and gets mainstream attention. Or we get live service forever games that, outside of established MMOs like World of Warcraft, Final Fantasy XIV, and to an extent Destiny 2 and Warframe, are just doomed to languish in an attempt to suck as much money out of you through FOMO before dying an ignoble death. Where are the AA games at? I bring this up because one of the games I mentioned last week, and the focus of this week, Flintlock: The Siege of Dawn, is the epitome of the AA, perfectly cromulent 7 out of 10 video game that we kind of need more of these days. Developed by A44 Games of Ashen fame, and published by Kepler Interactive, Flintlock: The Siege of Dawn is an action RPG set in something of a unique fantasy setting. During a 10-year-long war with the undead, you play as Nor, a sapper in the Coalition's military, fighting off the undead in the trenches. After being tricked into destroying a magical barrier that unleashes the gods who wish to destroy the world, Nor is found and accompanied by Enki, a mysterious little fox creature who knows more than he's letting on. Together, they go on a quest to stop the tides of undead flooding the world and kill the gods that set this plot in motion. As a fine connoisseur of revenge stories, this is as standard as it gets in a charming way. A huge part of this working is the dynamic between Nor and Enki being very good, which allows them to bounce off each other for some entertaining stretches of dialogue. And the setting itself also does a lot of heavy lifting. With the use of warfare that's more akin to the late 19th century than your standard medieval fare, Flintlock's flavor of fantasy is more black powder and trench axes than it is swords and sorcery, and it makes for a very nice change of pace. I wish it capitalized more on what this setting has established, because what's there is incredibly cool. Like this weird spirit that hosts the coffee houses that uses their arms to form a sort of neck to hold up their face mask. Another thing I have to point out is that while the main art style is more unique from the standard fantasy trappings, with a lot of Indian and even African-inspired elements mixed in at the first glance, there's still a lot of the usual European fantasy trappings mixed in as well. I think a lot of it has to do with me weirdly having Warhammer Fantasy on the brain the last few weeks, but a lot of the standard sword and sorcery stuff, especially the various flavors of armored knights, reminds me of the stuff you'd see from the Empire of Man. Which I don't mind, because it can get into some really weird shit, but I wish it was a little bit more weird. You know, a little weirdness as a treat. Please? Please, sir, can I have some weird? But that complaint aside, I do like what Flintlock is doing visually. Also, I think I've rambled enough about the story and aesthetic. I think now is going to be a good time to get into the gameplay and how it sets itself apart from other fare in this genre. One of the main ways that Flintlock: The Siege of Dawn sets itself apart from other games in the action RPG genre is by loudly and proudly declaring itself as a quote-unquote Soulslite. Whatever that means. I think it's A44's way of saying, we have the difficulty or comparable difficulty of a Souls game, but not as punishing. And I need to get something off of my chest real quickly. The output of From Software's games is known for their difficulty, and rightly so, mainly because Demon's Souls was released at a time when game difficulty was at an all-time low that it might as well have been subterranean. But dying over and over again wasn't the main selling point despite what the marketing said. It was the exploration, the inhabiting of a doomed or soon-to-be doomed or dead world. It was a whole-ass vibe of traversing a world where the apocalypse had either already happened or was about to happen, and piecing together how it all went to shit. It's not just controller-breaking difficulty, it's immaculate vibes and well-told background stories in dead worlds, and also not holding a player's hand and trusting to not be a total dipshit at the same time. And I'm getting kind of sick of other developers looking at how these games performed against the standards of the market and going, oh, Face kicking difficulty good? No, this is supposed to be the main takeaway! Okay, rant over. I bring this up because Flintlock's self-branding as a Soulslite feels like it's understanding what I was yelling about just now, while also kind of missing the point of what makes From Software games so special. Well, it does go for the your main currency also levels you up, and you drop it if you die mechanic, and enemies can easily rip your head off if you aren't paying attention, and the parrying and the exploration and all that jazz. A lot of it feels like it's more along the lines of your standard action RPG that's just flirting with those ideas. Now, the best games in this genre, like Lies of P or an extent Hollow Knight, use that stuff while also understanding that the exploration, the character side quests, and the background narrative are also the stars of the show. And this can be reflected in the world design itself. Flintlock divvies up its play space into 3 distinct areas where the majority of the RPG stuff is and where the point of no return is going to be. It uses the main narrative as a means of shaping the world by having a quite linear critical path with enough offshoots from that critical path to do some exploration and have some hidden goodies. A perfect example of this would have to be a time when I went off the beaten path and found this small ruined fort. From there, I explored, got some new weapons, and fought a challenging mini-boss enemy. That shit was cool! I liked it a lot! It's just that there's not enough of it there, which sucks because it's really good. But I will say this, though. It does play into, for my money, the best feature in Flintlock: verticality in movement. A huge part of the exploration is facilitated through the use of black powder. Like I mentioned earlier in the synopsis, Nora is a sapper and can use black powder for a variety of applications. The main ones being the use of explosives to get around, whether it be through sapper charges to open up shortcuts or new passages, or getting around the level. You can use Nora's black powder capabilities to just move in an incredible fashion, which is part of what makes the level design so frustrating at times, because you have this really good suite of movement tech and you barely use it. Elements of said tech being a double jump, dodge, and an air dash. And if you time your jump and dash just quick enough, you can move around like a goddamn speed demon, and it's awesome. I'm not sure if it's intended tech, but I like it. Plus, there's also some stuff Anki can help you out with, specifically with these random-ass skull feather things that can allow you to gain even more height and speed for making it through long distances, but are mainly relegated to being shortcuts. Disappointing? A little. Useful for reducing tedium and runbacks? Absolutely! Overall, the exploration and level design doesn't really stray off of its critical path too hard, and it can be linear as hell at times, but ultimately, it's good. I like it. Later parts of the first area are a bit of a schlep, though. I do appreciate that you can liberate small hamlets on the map that serve as points where you can get rumors for side quests and more health pickups as the game goes on. That's a great way to flesh out the world. And now for the combat. Combat and other adjacent systems are clearly where a lot of the heavy lifting went into regarding the gameplay. With the use of varying firearms and melee weapons, Flintlock feels like a weird mashup of Sekiro, Bloodborne, and obviously, of course, Dark Souls. That sounds like a weird mashup considering that the first two were begotten from the third, but I mean in the sense that being an action RPG with a focus on parrying, dodging, and aggression. You got your standard light and heavy attacks, your flintlock pistol as a sort of interrupt, and your long rifle, be it a flintlock rifle, mortar launcher, whatever, for massive damage, crowd control, etc. And it has the active reload mechanic from Gears of War for increased damage, which is sick. Alright, let's address the elephant in the room. The mechanics in Flintlock aren't nearly refined enough for how ambitious some combat encounters can get, with unblockable attacks, enemy speed being unpredictable at times, or even feeling a bit unfair with the aggression at points. But the foundation of a system that supports that is there. It just needs the refinement that only a sequel can guarantee. But what's there is good, but it just never rises above being just good. That's not to say that I don't like it, far from it. I like Flintlock's combat quite a bit. While some of the aggression can be nonsensical at first, when you lock in and get to being the aggressor, hoo boy is it fun as hell! When you dart in, kick a zombie's ass, and interrupt his buddy with a pistol shot, you feel like a goddamn badass and it's awesome. And I at points wish it leaned into this power fantasy more than the Soulslite stuff. You also got armor for set bonuses like increased regeneration of gunpowder on attacks, which, by the way, you can get your small arms ammo back from attacking, which is where the leaning into the aggression aspect comes from. And these, along with your weapons, can all be upgraded at camp, though I didn't have too much trouble otherwise without those upgrades. Oh, and you can use Enki to curse enemies for more damage or to strip them of armor and set up crit kills. And lastly, there's a decent skill tree for making you better in melee combat, better with guns, and to improve Enki's abilities in combat. It's a good skill tree that could mix and match stuff and allow for the use of skills on one tree to unlock another if they're in the same or higher tier. It's pretty good. While combat is at its best when leaning into the chaotic aspects of it, it's also really good when it's taking it slow against slower, more powerful opponents. This is best exemplified in the boss fights with the various gods you need to kill. Let me show you. Is this not the sickest thing you've ever seen? Because look at it, this is so sick! When you weave into the parry timings when you're supposed to, it can be so fucking good. And while I understand that this footage looks more like Punch-Out at points more so than Sekiro, it's still a great feeling to just no-sell a boss into submission. Is Flintlock the Siege of Dawn perfect? No. But then again, no game is except for Mega Man X. Its world might be small, and it's not as weird as it could be, and its gameplay is rough around the edges, but I still like it. This is the kind of game I want a sequel for, if only to fully see its ambitions realized and its already good concepts refined. While it's not my favorite game of 2024, Flintlock The Siege of Dawn is the quintessential 7 out of 10 that I'm thankful exists and wish that the video game industry took more of a chance on. And that will be it for this week's video. Thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to like it if you did and share it around as well. It helps the channel out a lot. Thank you and have a wonderful weekend.